If you're parenting a trans-identified teenager, then the search for what to do to help them has likely been a bit of a roller coaster. Maybe you did some research and found a lot of information insisting that the only way a good parent would respond is by literally affirming their child's new identity. And maybe you tried that, but it felt really inauthentic, and that doing so wouldn't really address the root causes that your child is struggling with. So you kept searching online, and maybe you found some different types of resources. Maybe you found our podcast, Gender a Wider Lens, some of the parent groups that exist out there, or organizations like GenSpect. And you likely came across documentaries, books, parent blogs, and detransition stories. Now, this research is really important to help you recognize that as a parent, there are lots of different ways to think about this. But it can also be overwhelming. And you might feel like you are whiplashing back and forth, really unsure of what to do to help your actual child. So today I'm going to distill 10 principles that I've recognized while working with trans-identified teens and hundreds of families since 2016. These principles in general can help families to stay connected and offer young people a broader perspective as well as some psychological stability. They might even lead towards desistance, or at least give young people a more flexible way to think about gender, their identities, and their bodies. If you're watching this on YouTube, before we get into the principles, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel if you find this information helpful, so that more parents who are looking for this kind of information will find it too. Principle number 1, trust your instincts. We recently completed an in-person parenting event through Wider Lens Consulting. It's an event for parents of trans-identified kids to come together and talk about what they've learned and hear from myself and the other 2 therapists about how to help their children. And what we noticed is that a lot of parents are treated quite poorly by doctors, schools, therapists, and other adults in their child's life, just for sharing their hesitations or concerns. And we want to enforce that you are not a bad parent. And in fact, it's your deep knowledge of your child and your love for your child which likely creates doubts for you in the first place about affirming their new identity. Principle number 2, do your own research, know your kid, and then re-engage with a plan. So collecting information and learning from others is really valuable. But remember that your child is unique, and while there are similarities with sudden onset gender distress, each child is different, each situation is different, and so knowing your own child and the particulars of their situation is the most important thing. And after all of this research, if you find yourself feeling a bit paralyzed and not knowing where to go next, it's important to get offline, get done with the research, and then re-engage with your child and your family. Principle number 3, set clear, enforceable limits and follow through. Your teenager may be asking for a new name, new pronouns, medical interventions, and social transition. When faced with so many choices and so much ambiguity, this can actually create confusion for a teenager, sometimes making them feel like they just have to prove how real this is to them so that you will make a final decision. I think it's important to lean in with love and clarity with your young teenager. You might say something like, "Honey, I see how distressed you are about this, and I believe that you are experiencing something really, really important to you. But I've given this a lot of thought, and we're not going to be pursuing insert request here. So you'll have to think about what the limits are for your family and enforce them with a lot of love, but a lot of clarity." Principle number 4, identify your perspective and don't be afraid to speak honestly. So it's important to take your time and do some research to inform yourself before making big changes. But it's also important to reflect quite deeply, maybe through journaling, or just taking some time on your own to identify what do you believe. Identify a statement that feels true for you. For example, I don't believe changing your identity resolves the real issues. Or, I don't think transforming your body is the best way to heal emotional pain. Or something like, medicine is not magic. Even if you fully transitioned, you'll never actually become male or female. These statements are important because they give you something to fall back on, and you have to figure out what statements are true for you based on your beliefs and attitudes. Principle number 5, take the distress seriously, but not literally. In many cases, this is not really about gender in the first place. So try to read between the lines rather than debating with your child. Avoiding power struggles about I'm trans, no, you're not trans is really helpful here. Those debates usually go nowhere. You can acknowledge and empathize with your child's distress without actually agreeing with the conclusion they've drawn that transitioning is the answer. And if you become highly anxious and obsessed with this issue, remember, if you can learn to hold it with a little bit of a lighter touch and avoid giving it too much power, you might invite your child to do the same thing. So try to model that gentle approach rather than getting really locked in rigid perspectives. Principle number 6, get your own support. Finding a trusted therapist or a parent coach or joining a support group for parents that feels hopeful to you and inspires you to engage with your child, even when you're feeling scared about it, can be a very helpful step. If you can learn to improve your communication or find your authority again as a parent and parent with more confidence, this can actually make a world of a difference in how you navigate this very difficult parenting experience. My parent membership group is a great place to learn, connect, and navigate your child's identity exploration with greater discernment, wisdom, and compassion. If you're interested in joining, you'll find a link below with information about how to join me there. And I'm going to also share the last 4 principles inside my parent membership group. So if you're interested in those, please take a look at the link.